Senior leaders from Pakistan's main opposition parties have struck a deal to form a new coalition government. The Pakistan Muslim League-Nawaz and the Pakistan People's Party finally reached the agreement after days of intense negotiations. As per the announcement, PMLN President Shehbaz Sharif is set to assume the role of the Prime Minister once again. At the same time, PPP co-chairman Asif Zardari is set to become the country's president again. The news of the alliance comes after the cash-strapped country faced a hung parliament after the elections held on the 8th of February. The Pakistan border police fired tear gas at hundreds of protesters at Shaman border between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Thousands have been staging demonstrations, sit-ins and road blockades near the border since October. The protests come as opposition to the quote-unquote one-document requirement for travel by the government. The newly implemented decision makes it mandatory for all those who pass through the border to have a valid passport. Separately, Shaman is one of the most important crossings for goods and travelers between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Thousands of Indian farmers are once again on the road to the national capital. This after the fourth round of talks with the government has failed to clear the logjam. The farmers began the resumed march at 11 a.m. this morning. More than 14,000 people and over 1,200 trucks are currently present at the Punjab-Haryana Shambhu border. Farmers have brought in JCBs and other earth-moving machines to break through the barricades and march towards Delhi. The farmers are also equipped with gas masks to deal with security forces, smoke and tear gas shelling. The farmers are demanding a legal guarantee on MSP on 23 crops, along with other policy changes. Beijing has expressed high hopes that France will continue to help develop healthy Sino-European relations. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said that the two are expected to enhance mutual trust and promote integration of interests. During the meeting between the Chinese Foreign Minister and French President Emmanuel Macron, China asked France to create a fair and just business environment for Chinese companies. In a separate meeting between the Chinese diplomat and his French counterpart, the two sides discussed issues related to peace and security. The meeting also mentioned increasing the frequency of direct flights between China and France. Escalating a 4-week showdown with the government, Greek farmers protested in Athens on Tuesday to demand financial aid amid growing inflation. As per the police, some 8,000 farmers took part in the protest, in which at least 130 tractors, dozens of pickup trucks and vans were parked in front of the Greek parliament. Meanwhile, the government has issued a statement saying that they do not have any more funds to spend on the farmers. The farmers have demanded import controls, lower fuel taxes, better prices for products and an easing of European Union environmental regulations. Russian President Vladimir Putin congratulated his defense minister Sergei Shoigu on capturing Avdiivka in eastern Ukraine. The president said that now the Russian military should develop its success, fully prepared with ammunition, weapons and personnel. Defense Minister Shoigu said that the military launched up to 460 strikes on Avdiivka on a day. This is equivalent to about 200 metric tons of explosives. On Saturday, Moscow officials announced that they had taken total control of Avdiivka. Ukrainian forces have confirmed pulling out of the bombed-out city. Russian and Venezuelan foreign diplomats met in Caracas on Tuesday to strengthen ties. The two U.S. oppositions vowed to boost cooperation in oil and gas production and the peaceful use of nuclear energy. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov arrived in Venezuela as part of his Latin American tour. This comes as Moscow has set out to seek new trading partners amid Western sanctions and isolation over its war in Ukraine. The Russian diplomat, after meeting his Venezuelan counterpart, Julian Gil, also met with the country's Vice President Delcy Rodriguez. South Korea will investigate people instigating collective industrial action by doctors over a walkout protest. The government also said that they will make arrests if required. Over 7,000 trainee doctors walked off the job to protest a government medical reform plan. The plan in question seeks to admit more students to medical school. However, the authorities are concerned that the walkout could threaten people's lives and safety. To boost healthcare in remote areas and meet growing demand in South Korea's aging societies, the government wants to boost medical school admissions to 5,000 from 2025 academic year. The United States vetoed a UN Security Council resolution on the Israel-Hamas war for the third time. Washington blocked a demand for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, while 13 of the 15 council members vetoed in favor of the draft. UK chose to abstain. Washington says the veto comes over concerns of weakening of mediation talks between United States, Egypt, Israel and Qatar for the release of hostages. The bloc draft resolution, which was drawn up by Algeria, did not link a ceasefire to the release of hostages. Palestinian UN Ambassador Riyad Mansour said blocking the draft would mean quote-unquote more war horrors, as per the Hamas-controlled health authorities in Gaza. At least 29,000 Palestinians have been killed in the war. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that Israel will not pay any price for the return of hostages. Tel Aviv's Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said the only way to free them was by ramping up the military pressure on Gaza and defeating Hamas. The remarks drew criticism from the opposition and angered families of hostages, who continue to pressure on the government to strike a deal. The remarks come as diplomats from US, Egypt, Israel and Qatar are set to meet to broker a ceasefire and hostage release deal. The Israeli military conducted live fire drills with tanks in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights on Tuesday. The IDF also practiced evacuation exercises of mass casualties via helicopters in northern Israel. Remember, the Golan Heights were part of Syria until 1967. In 1981, Israel captured most of the area in the infamous Six-Day War, after which it annexed the territory. That unilateral annexation was not recognized internationally, and Syria demands the return of the territory. The war games come as the United States vetoed United Nations demand over a ceasefire in Gaza. A freelance journalist in Gaza City filmed himself and others while running away from explosions and heavy gunfire on Tuesday. In the video, Hussam Shabad is running past bombed-out buildings, along with who he says are other journalists. He also is heard saying, and I'm quoting here, "They are shooting towards us directly." At least 2 people have been killed after an Israeli airstrike hit a vehicle in the Rafah city, the southernmost tip of the Gaza Strip. Local residents and displaced people came together to pull the damaged bodies of the victims from the car wreck. People had to collect the scattered body parts in a bag, after which they were taken to Abu Yusuf al-Najjar Hospital. At the hospital, people had to go through the body parts to ascertain if the victims were their family members or not. On the same afternoon, an Israeli airstrike hit a residential house, claiming the lives of at least 12 people. Among the victims were a woman and her 4 children. Several Israeli missiles hit a residential building in the Kafr Sousa district in the Syrian capital Damascus on Wednesday. The neighborhood hosts residential buildings, schools and Iranian cultural centers. It also lies near a large, heavily guarded complex used by security agencies. This is the second Israeli attack on the district. It was targeted in February 2023 last that killed Iranian military experts. The World Health Organization has transferred 32 critical patients from Gaza's Nasser hospital in the last 2 days. Among the 32, there are 2 children. As per the World Health Organization, an estimated 130 patients and at least 15 health workers remained inside the hospital. The Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis has ceased to function following Israel's military raid on the 14th of February. As the case against the WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange drags on, his legal team argued it would be against United Kingdom's law to hand him over to the United States. This came at a 2-day High Court hearing which began on Tuesday. If this appeal, which is one of his final ones, gets rejected, Julian Assange could be extradited to the United States within weeks. He was targeted by the United States intelligence agencies over his exposure of state-level crimes. Leaving the court, Julian Assange's wife Stella Assange told a crowd of supporters that former U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has an obsession with killing Julian Assange. His lawyers also said that Assange was also at a risk of further extrajudicial actions by the Central Intelligence Agency. They hinted that he could be assassinated or subjected to harm beyond a criminal sanction after a fair trial. Missouri prosecutors say that 2 men have been charged with murder in last week's shooting that killed 1 person and injured 22 others in the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl parade. Both adults are charged with second-degree murder and other charges. Authorities say that they have been hospitalized since the shooting. The new charges come after 2 juveniles were detained last week on gun-related and resisting arrest charges. Authorities say more charges are possible. A dispute among several people led to the shooting, which took place even as 800 police officers patrolled the celebration. The Democratic Republic of Congo's Prime Minister Jean-Michel Sama-Lukonde resigned from his duties on Tuesday. As per the presidency, the resignation has triggered the dissolution of his government. The leader submitted his resignation to the country's president, Felix Tshisekedi. It comes 8 days after the validation of his mandate as a national deputy. He is now set to join the parliament as member of the assembly. While the resignation has been accepted, the current government has been asked to continue stint until the formation of the new government. The United Nations has raised alarms over the depleting conditions in the Democratic Republic of Congo. DRC's UN humanitarian coordinator said, and I quote, that the humanitarian situation in Congo has worsened on all fronts. The resurgence in hostility between the M23 group and the Congolese armed forces has led to severe displacement. The statement furthered that the country is currently faced with massive floods and has affected at least 2 million people across the country. In fact, the United Nations also said that gender-based and sexual violence has also increased many a times. Over 100,000 cases of gendered or sexual were reported in 2023, which the United Nations called the tip of the iceberg. The agency has also said that the crisis in Congo is going unnoticed amidst the war in Gaza and Ukraine. At least 33 people have died due to the bad weather in Bolivia after heavy rains wreaked havoc in the region. As per local authorities, over 11,000 families have been affected due to the weather conditions. In fact, in West Bolivia, families had to be rescued with boats after the Paria River burst its banks on Sunday. Since last week, incessant rains have authorities on watch as the regional dam neared its capacity, causing landslides. Iraq's mighty rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, are suffocating under pollutants ranging from sewage to medical waste. As per the United Nations figures, half the population in Iraq lacks access to safe drinking water. The United Nations has also said that the state institutions are to blame for a quote-unquote man-made disaster which is turning rivers into waste dumps. With scarce water availability and a decrease in rainfall frequency, the country's Water Resources Department has been left in a fix. The department said that improper or incomplete treatment of water before its release into the rivers is leading reason behind the rise in pollution. China's housing authority said $17.20 billion of development loans have been approved under a special mechanism aimed at injecting liquidity into the crisis-hit property sector. The mechanism is a key plank of Beijing's efforts to stabilize the property sector's debt crisis and boost confidence in an industry that accounts for a quarter of China's GDP. So far, 214 cities across the nation have set up the mechanism, recommending more than 5,300 projects to banks. On to business news now. HSBC Holdings reported a record annual profit that came in below analysts' forecasts as the income boost from higher interest rates was offset by a hefty $3 billion charge from its stake in a Chinese bank. HSBC, which has a market value of $160 billion, reported a pre-tax profit of $30.3 billion for 2023, up 78% from $17.5 billion a year earlier. The British lender rewarded investors with a fresh $2 billion share buyback and said it would consider a special dividend of $0.21 per share in the first half of 2024 once its Canada disposal is complete.